Welcome back, and we're here today with another tutorial, and this time we're going to be going over the configuration files on your server, how to change them and what they are. So with that, let's open up our internet browsing tab and log on to our multicraft page on SeekaHost. So if we go over to the files over here, you're going to click that and you're going to see the first one down is config files. And on the top of the list we have server settings. So this is all the settings that you're going to need for your server. You start off with the settings displayed as they are now. However, you can jump on and change this. So I'm currently doing the Java one. So with that, let's get started. Allow flying, obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. It's whether you want players to be able to fly or not fly on your server. We can enable or disable that. Allow another, again, you can enable or disable that if you so wish. Difficulty, this is where you choose whether it's easy, peaceful, normal or hard. You might want to go for normal, but it totally depends on what game experience you want. Game query is probably not something that you're going to use yourself, but if you do want to know what it is, it enables the game spy form protocol server listener, and that's used to get information about your server. Again, you probably won't use that yourself. The enable recon enables remote access to the server console. Again, you probably won't need to change any of these things. I usually keep them disabled unless you got them for another purpose. Force game mode, that's whether you want to force a game mode upon a player when he logs in. If you want to enable that, it will then force the game mode that you've got underneath here. So if you choose survival, they'll forever be in survival when they log in, adventure or spectator and creative. Again, that's your choice. As we go down to generate structures, that's whether you want to enable the structures to generate in the world. You can enable or disable that. For the generator setting, we won't delve too much into that, so that involves a JSON file being put there. If we go down to hardcore mode, you can enable or disable that. Of course, if you don't know, hardcore mode is set on the hardest setting, and if you die, you have to start over again. Hell world, you can enable or disable that, again, if you so wish. The level seed here, if you fancy changing the level seed, you can find a nice one that you like. Copy and paste that into here, restart the server, and you'll start on that seed. Level type, you do have choices here, whether you want a standard world, flat world, large biomes, amplified height limit, or if you want a customized world. Max build height, of course you can change this. You might want to put it down, you might want to put it up. I usually leave it because the standard is 256, but again, absolutely up to you. Message of the day, that's what message you want to appear underneath your title when people go to log on to your server, and it will also get put out on the server if people request the message of the day. So you can change this over. At the moment it just says a Minecraft server. For the online mode, I do recommend keeping that enabled because it just checks that the Minecraft players are actually in fact legitimate other Minecraft players, and it will check against Minecraft's database. If we head down to player idle timeout, that is how long a player will be able to sit there without doing anything on your world before the server kicks him off. Especially if you have quite a few people on there, you don't want 10-20 people just sat around doing absolutely nothing, taking up server space. You want to get them kicked off. You can change this, of course. This is in minutes, so at the moment it's on 30 minutes. We can change it to 60 minutes and so on. Player versus player, otherwise known as PvP, whether you want to enable that, that allows other players to hurt other players. If you disable it, it will stop that completely. Resource pack is if you want to add a resource pack, but we'll delve into that into another video. Snooper Enabled, that does usually come as default as enabled because it allows the server to send Snoop data regularly, and that's back and forth to a Minecraft site that you can check. Spawn animals, of course, is whether you want the server to be spawning animals automatically. If you don't want that, you can disable it and you won't have any more animals spawning. If we head down, that's same with the spawn monsters. You can enable or disable that. Spawn NPCs, that's whether you want non-playable characters to be able to get spawned onto the level. If you don't want that, you can disable it. For spawn protection size, it's going to be protecting the area around where the world spawn is, so that's where everybody spawns into the world, and whether you change it, it will protect 16 blocks in the radius around it. Again, you can of course change this over, so you can change this to 30, 40, 50, and it will protect all of them blocks and it won't allow them to get broken. Texture pack is whether you're adding a texture pack for a URL, however we'll go through that in another video. View distance, that's of course how many chunks it will load in front of the player that you can see. It'll start as a default on 10, but you can change it up to, I believe it's 32, maybe more, but of course that depends how much your device can handle, because you don't want to overload it, and it will of course slow the game, so usually 10's about a good default number. Coming down here, it's whitelisting, and that's whether you want to enable or disable whitelisting, which means if the player's not been invited, they won't be able to join your server. They have to specifically be whitelisted on your console, on your server, sorry, for them to be able to join it. We'll go through that in another video, but just a quick explanation. Through your control panel, you can do a whitelist add or remove player. Once you have enabled this, that will then add or remove players onto your list. Max tick time is the minimum amount of milliseconds it will take before the server decides to stop because something's going wrong and it's taking too long to load each tick. OP permission level sets the default permission level for OPs when you use /OP and you OP another player. For announced achievements, we usually keep this enabled, but of course you can switch this off if you don't want achievements to pop up on your server. Come down to enable command blocks. You can usually people keep this disabled depending on whether they want to use them. You don't want to just leave it enabled because potentially people could use them against you in a server, so you want to make sure you're only enabling them if you know what to do with them, because of course people can program little things into command blocks. One thing I do want to add about the spawn protection, which I forgot to say earlier, is that you do have to have an OP on your server. If you don't, it's disabled by default. So once you do have an operator on there, it's then enabled to the spawn protection size that you want. We will skip through some of the ones which you really won't need on your server, like the net compression threshold too much. If you do want to, of course, you can research more into that. The max world size, it will usually come at this size on a server. It's just under 3 million, or 3 million, I believe. You can decrease that and make it as small as you want the world size to be. Query port sets the port for the query server, if it is, of course, enabled. Enforce the whitelist, so that means once you have enabled the whitelist, you want to enforce it so nobody can get around that. They simply have to be whitelisted onto the server to be able to actually join. Broadcast console to OPs, that will send a command output to all online operators, and the broadcast Archon to OPs will send Archon console command outputs to all online operators. Entity broadcast range percentage, that's how far away the entities need to be away from you before they're recognised by yourself, the player. If you set this too far, it might start lagging out the game, however, because it's going to start recognising them from quite a far distance, therefore having to load up more of the server. Enable status makes the server appear as online on the server list. Function permission level, that will set the default permission level for any functions that you've got going on. The Archon port will set the Archon network port, and the Archon password will of course be the password. Prevent proxy connections, you can set that to true or false. That's if the ISP/SA sent from the server is different from the one to Mojang Studios Authenticator server, then the player is kicked. So true will enable it, server prevents user from using VPN or proxies. False disables it, and the server doesn't prevent users from using VPNs or proxies. Use native transport, Linux service performance improvements, optimized packet sending, receiving on Linux. You can enable that to true, which will enable Linux packet sending, receiving optimization. If you put it to false, it will disable Linux packet sending, receiving optimization. Again, a lot of these things that I'll just mention now, or some of the things that I have mentioned, really don't need to be messing around with. However, I will just let you know what they are. Enable JMX monitoring, that will expose the mbean with the object name. And the rate limit sets the maximum amount of packets the user can send before getting kicked. Setting it to 0 will disable this feature. So if you have changed any of the settings, all you got to do at the end is just hit save. It'll bring you back to here. You'll see config file saved. Back to the server and hit restart. Once that has restarted, all the configuration files will now be implemented. For more SeekaHost tutorials, make sure to check out my channel, and of course if you want to start up your own server, there'll be a link in the description.